And even the developer from across the road, he said, I've never met people like you. He said, it usually as a developer, it's about the bottom line. And it's like, you're about, and then he paused, he said, you're about people. And I said, you've got it. You have got it. This is it. Yeah.
That was Lynda Utting. In this episode, I interview Mark and Lynda Utting, who are living on the Sunshine Coast of Queensland, Australia. They contacted me because they wanted to share with me about their way of developing in their backyard that they believe is going to give a great quality of life to the people who are going to be living on the property that they design and build. They are what I might call incremental developers, meaning that they are building in the backyard to create more housing. This is able to be done because the zoning in their area has been scaled as medium density, meaning they've been given permission to build up to 9 units in their backyard. Now, a lot of people get worried when they hear about infill development because it means that it might be that shade is blocking out the houses or it doesn't look and match the style of the original neighborhood, or that there might be too many cars parked on the road. There's lots of reasons why a current neighborhood might resist or be very unhappy to have new houses built in the infill spaces. Yet, Mark and Lynda have come up with a design that I think few would have problems with. In their design, they have not done the 9 houses that they're allowed to do, but have kept it to an additional 4 homes because they are prioritizing quality of life for their residents and better design altogether. The reason why I think this is a great interview is because actually density and infill development can be done better, but we need to see examples, and we also need to be able to have incentives for doing infill development better rather than just going for the profit motive. And we need to look at how can councils tell the difference between bad development, infill, density, and what I would say is a lot better design. So have a listen to this episode about what better infill development can look like, what it means to be a lay developer, meaning that they are not professional developers, and how they are building this sense of neighborliness into the design of their homes. Enjoy! Kia ora, and welcome to the Homefulness Show. I'm your host, Zola Rose, located in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We believe housing can be a means for regenerative placemaking to create affordable and sustainable homes and neighborhoods developed in collaboration with the communities that live there. We'll be exploring different housing models and neighborhood designs and innovation in energy, water, waste, construction, land use, and food systems. We showcase housing policies, finance, funding, and community engagement to unlock this potential. This show aims to empower you with knowledge, resources, and networks to support you in creating great places to live. Come join us as we bring to life the more beautiful housing that we know is possible. So, Mark and Lynda, welcome to the Homefulness Show.
Thank you very much for having the opportunity to come and meet with you here. That's great.
So we met each other when I was in Queensland for the Housing Older Women Movement series of events, workshops that were exploring all kinds of solutions to housing older women, collective housing, neighborhoods that are more conducive to social cohesion, ways to enable affordability. And then you approached me with, hey, we've got a way that we're able to do that. I like to ask what it was like in terms of your growing up, what meant home to you and how you define that feeling or that look of home.
So firstly, yeah, we grew up in the 60s as little kids, and it was free range parenting style back then. It was just like mum would say, just make sure you're home in time for dinner. So we roamed the neighborhood. We had friends up the street. We had a stable life, and we lived in a house, usually more than 5 or 6 or 7 years. I don't remember moving a lot. And we made friendships in that neighborhood, and some of them still exist today. So it was a really lovely time of freedom and joy. And I don't remember any stresses as a young child. It was very stable. I felt safe.
Whereas for me, I grew up on a dairy farm with two sisters, so we could roam the farm, but not so much the neighbours.
And what I'm hearing from you both is that it was your family home and a sense of belonging in place.
Yeah.
And was that also in Queensland, both of you?
Oh, I grew up until I was about 7 or 8. I was in the Waikato in New Zealand, and then we moved overseas. So I grew up overseas.
I grew up in Te Puke in North Island, Bay of Plenty.
So moving into what has moved you into creating this housing model, what are you seeing around you? What are the things that concern you? What are the challenges that you believe this model addresses?
For me, this is my heart mission, really. I've worked a lot with refugees, and hospitality is my passion. So it's just an extension of wanting to help those who are less fortunate. We're in a position we've got a large backyard here, which is medium density zoned, which the council says you can build up to 9 dwellings on the back of it, on the whole site if we knock down our house. And with our heart mission being to help others that are less fortunate, the housing crisis is everywhere you breathe. You can't open any media or paper, anything these days. Yesterday, it was just constant news feed, housing crisis, housing affordability. And I think it's as bad in New Zealand probably as it is here. Is that right?
Yeah, we've had the human rights, the representative for adequacy to housing, and she was just scathing about the state of housing in Aotearoa, and that was way back in 2019.
So if we could just look at doing what we can do, and if everybody just thinks, oh, it's too big a problem, how do we fix it? But if everybody can just look at what can I do to make it better? If everybody makes a little step, then surely to accumulate it all, then there's going to be a little bit of progress. And yes, we're working with our local members as well and looking at the policies that government has now for incentivizing infill development and things like that, because there's a lot of extra charges. We're mum and dad investors. We don't have the money to pay for these infrastructure charges, and they're enormous. So if that's going to be a stumbling block for development, then that means a lot of people won't be able to do what we want to do, which is build extra units in our backyard, which is the way I think we're talking infill development. So we're actually creating something very attractive and elegant and affordable housing in our street. And it's going to have a lot of green vegetation. It's sustainable. And so our desire is really to provide that affordable housing. And Mark's got technical skills, and I'll let him speak about his passion for energy efficiency and elegance of design.
Well, that's wonderful. So just to summarize, what I'm hearing is that you have a property which has a large backyard. You've said, how can we make the best use of it to address what we're seeing as not enough housing and affordable housing? And you also trying to take advantage of what the government has in terms of its planning policies or the zoning for your site to be able to have multiple dwellings in your backyard. And then you've got an additional layer, what I'm hearing, of sustainability and beauty. And so combining that, so it's not just throwing something in the backyard, but you're really thinking quite long term in terms of how can this be a beautiful place for many people to live. And did you also have in mind neighborliness? Were you thinking that you'd want to create sort of a sense of connection between the folks, not just randoms living?
Exactly.
It's randoms. Yeah.
Just across the road, which is why we've got the window closed, there's another block exactly the same as ours, 1,800 square meters, which they're building 9 two-story units in a row.
The townhouses.
So it'll be all concrete driveway and 9-story units, and not much. Well, not many, no trees or greenery much. Just a small front yard. And so, in contrast to that, we decided to go for the minimum number of dwellings, which is 5, that the council wants to see on a medium density block this size. We decided to keep our existing house and try and have as much room for trees and grass and gardens as we can. So it's quite a different concept.
Absolutely. So you've got the urban heat island effect across the road, And there's going to be a cookie cutter, one of those right beside us. So ours is going to look like a haven. Birds will come and live. They'll be able to keep their homes, the wildlife. And so what we're doing is very different. In fact, it's caught the attention of the editor from the local paper who came and interviewed us a few weeks ago. And even the developer from across the road, we've had words. And he said, I've never met people like you. He said, usually as a developer, it's about the bottom line. And it's like, you're about, and then he paused. He said, you're about people. And I said, you've got it. You have got
Right.
it. This is it. Yes.
Yes, and much more even than people. I'm hearing value for the wildlife and for
Yep.
the wider environmental issues being cooler and the look of it greener is calmer on the eyes. And I'm sure that there's
Yep.
so many values that you thinking a little bit smaller, not maximizing your profit, but maximizing the other, what I call capitals, which is the natural capital and the social capital and even the built environment, that it just looks better. You're going to have better quality over the long run. And that's really what I would love for other people to catch on to, is that it's cannot just all be profit. Housing has to consider those other things, because the nature of it is it's a home, and it's a home for families, and it's also a home for the creatures that we share the earth with.
Yeah.
I
Can I
speak-
show you the concept plans?
Yes, I'd love. Let's dive into actually what are we talking about? What does it look like? So go ahead
Yeah.
and share your screen, and then for those listening to the podcast, we're just going to describe what it is, and then I'll make links to these diagrams where people can click and then get them that way.
So can you see the plan on the screen?
Yes, I can.
Good. So the road is out here, and this is the existing house where we're actually in this room right here now, if you can see my mouse pointer.
Yep, I can.
And so we're going to keep that existing house and add 3 2-bedroom units plus a 3-bedroom house. And the unusual thing about this is that we're not just sort of doing this as developers. We love this location and we want to stay here. So we're actually going to live in the back house. And we'd like to rent out the front 4, or if we have to, we might sell some of them. But the idea is to create a community where people drive in and park in the courtyard. And so as they walk down to their units, they pass each other's kitchen windows at the front here and can see each other. And possibly also have, for example, a seat out in the courtyard where people can sit. So it's trying to build a community as well as having more density, 5 dwellings on the one site instead of just the one dwelling.
That's quite a common design feature for co-housing, which is cars is far to the outside, all in one place, and then that ability to walk and meet neighbors going to one's home. So it's really neat how even in a small scale, you've managed to create that.
We've just been finishing work with the landscape architect and all the choice of trees, and we're choosing a lot of mini variety fruit trees, even like mini avocados, mini mulberries, mini lychee, and so these will be in a communal spot where people can pick fruit as well. So it's a harvest that they can share, and that's another diagram.
So that's the mock-up of the landscape plan to show the green circles, obviously trees, and some of these, like this one here, is an avocado tree to try and have some fruit-bearing things in the courtyard, and some garden area for each place and gardens at the entrances. So trying to maximize the greenness, really.
Then I love your thinking of sharing the harvest, that it is a food production area anywhere that can be.
Can you see the way the units have been staggered? We decided not to go for the London kind of townhouse in a row sort of thing, just so that for creating a sense of individuality. Mark had the idea of painting the front door a different color, so that they have a sense of ownership, like this is my place. It's different to your place, even though that inside the area is the same. They have different sized gardens and different trees in their gardens. And
I can probably show you that. Yeah, this view here shows looking from the road. You can see the existing house and the three units down there. And those 3 doors, 1, 2, and the third one's hidden, will be slightly different colors, so you can see where they are from when you're standing in the courtyard as sort of a welcoming feature. So that doesn't show the trees.
And it also doesn't show at the back of the carports. We're having a roller door storage sheds for all the units, because in a 2-bedroom unit, there's not a lot of storage, and we're not giving them a garage. So we give them a nice shed that they can put their surfboard, or they can put whatever they want. We've got bicycle parking on site, but inside the sheds, they'll have room to store things.
We worked with an architect who's very keen on passive solar design and sustainability and things like that. That's why we went for the courtyard design, so that the driveway's at the south, and all of these units face north with a skillion ceiling going up to get as much light in as possible. I can take you inside one of them if you're interested.
That would be great. Yeah, let's go ahead. This is really a fun application that we can just zoom in and go inside.
If I go in there, you can see that it's just a big open plan living area, and it's going to be a triple opening door out to the alfresco, and it's also got these clear story windows up the top to maximize the light coming through, and 2 bedrooms on the right.
In the laundry,
So
and toilets.
So you can see there's a bedroom in there and toilets, and then out here there's a sort of an open dry creek stormwater catchment down there. So there'll be landscaping in here to look like an Australian creek, as well as the grass. So that gives you a bit of a concept what it would look like.
So the backyards, again, that co-housing design, with the backyards being a bit more privacy, but there's that neighborliness can happen as you're coming in and from that other side. So a mixture of social and private.
Yes,
Great
so
design.
right. The north side is the private side, and then the south side is the sort of public entrance garden and kitchen window.
How do you imagine fostering that sense of neighborliness? Do you have any specific either activities or things that you're going to suggest that they do?
I haven't really thought that through yet.
Maybe barbecues.
It seems a little way down the track, given that the property manager is going to be living on the site as well.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought that through as much, because the building is still a little way down the track.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah,
how to create community is a really good question.
I'd like to take a brief moment to share with you about Common Ground. The consulting agency works with local government, with community housing providers, with for-purpose developers, and with groups of people wishing to lead their own housing initiatives. We provide services in housing strategy, design and facilitation of meaningful community engagement, research, policy development, training in new approaches to better housing outcomes. We also provide services in workplace culture and communication to create more cohesive and effective working teams and workplaces. You can visit our website at commonground.net.nz to learn more about our services, and please sign up for our weekly newsletter for inspirational resources and get announcements to upcoming events. And then in terms of affordability, how have you thought about how does that work? And also, I heard you mention rent, but maybe own. So what are your thinking around that?
So I guess our definition of affordability is just if it's rented, then the rent should be at or slightly below the median rent for a 2-bedroom house in this area. So just trying to be just below the 50% mark. So it's not subsidized community accommodation or anything like that.
Or social housing per se.
It's just trying to increase the number of houses, because that's what we're really short of.
So the 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom are so lacking and gives people a lot more autonomy. And of course, there's the affordability.
Yeah.
That is such as rare as hen's teeth. That real estate agent said, if I had $1 for every time someone rang me or came to my office asking for 2-bedroom units, he said I'd be a wealthy man, because this is the price point that people can afford now. The median rent now, even for 3 bedrooms, is way, way off. I mean, if you're on a benefit, a single person can't afford rent at a 3-bedroom place. But we chose 2-bedroom as opposed to 1 because there's a lot of people with a disability pension, or they have a carer sometimes that stays with them. They need that extra room, but it also broadens the whole demographic for people who have got like single parents and they've got one child, or you're a young couple and you've got a guest room, or an elderly parent. That gives them that option as opposed to a one bedroom. We can do something really special here because we'll have control over who we choose to bring into our community. So who we open this up to, will it be the 55 plus year old women? Will it be the people who have on disabilities pensions? Whatever, it'll be our choice to create that community. So we're in a very privileged position. So in that sense, creating intentional community makes sense because you want to have those shared values. You want have your residents to have something in common with each other.
The only other thing is that we've designed these houses from the beginning to be accessible. So there's a wheelchair path all the way from the road, and the maximum step is 5 millimeters. And that's actually now required by legislation in Queensland. It came in last year. And the builders are saying, what a terrible thing. It's going to upset our designs and change costs. But actually, we said it's great. All the doorways have to be wider. The toilets and showers have to be accessible. So there's the option of elderly or disabled people being able to stay there comfortably as well.
Yeah. And then in terms of other folks staying on the property, how long other people might who are not on the lease agreement be able to stay, for instance. So yeah, those are all the things to be thought through if you're making kind of community guidelines.
We have a lot of things to think through. I mean, in the sense that there won't be a body corp as such because we're not strataing. If we sell, yes, we have strata and there'll be a body corp, but it comes under what's called a community management title. I think that would be a good idea because we do want to have them to have a sense of ownership in their spaces. So, because there'll be a communal area anyway. So we have to work out all those plans here.
And then I heard you mention maybe buy. How was that fitting in your thinking?
Well, there's always the possibility that you can sell some of the units. That means the property has to be strata titled and you have a community title and a body corporate and things like that. The 5 different houses could have 5 different owners.
Would you look at that down the line then, rather than, were you thinking to begin with rentals and then you'll consider how that strata title could work in the future if there's a sense of people wanting to own? Then you might consider that.
The idea sort of long term for us was going into retirement. We thought of this could supplement our retirement income because in Australia, we don't have the global pension like you do in New Zealand, and we wouldn't qualify for government pension because of our assets. So we would have to be self-sufficient in terms of our superannuation, and this would help support our super incomes. I would manage the properties. I would look at ways in doing some upskilling and property management so I could be there. And Mark's very handy. He liked the idea of doing some garden work. So that's also getting more, building relationships with our tenants.
Well, that's wonderful that you're thinking how, as a neighbor yourself, you're able to contribute to that sense of community and the maintenance of the property. It's quite rare to have the developer be also a resident. And I think that makes all the difference in the quality of the place.
Because we've got to live there as well.
I can imagine it'll sorts of advantages, but all sorts of challenges as well.
That's right. Because if you feel like, you're owning it, and I've seen that dynamic in the past where it's a good intention where we all are sort of having an equal voice, but in the end, who has the responsibility ultimately needs to make some final decision. So it's a real balancing of taking people's voice into consideration, but whoever has that responsibility is ultimately the one to make that final decision. And you'll feel that out as well as you go, and perhaps just to make that clear at the start, that power dynamic.
We have property in New Zealand and we have a property manager, but the difference being here is that the property manager being on site, how do you create that boundary? You're not available 24/7. You don't want your tenant to be knocking on your door at 2 a.m. because they've got a problem. So that'll be something we'll have to work out as well in terms of creating a boundary of what's business and what's private.
And in terms of sharing this model, what I'm hearing is you've got a news story that's covering it. Are you connected to any other incremental development or developer communities?
What can you define incremental development? What is
So
it?
there's an organization in America called Strong Towns, and it's promoting more affordable and more diverse housing options, good urban design, and they speak about incremental development and how we don't just need to wait for big developers and large.
Mm.
We need to build the capability of people like yourselves who've got space to add a few things. And so there's a whole movement around incremental development. If you check out the Strong Towns organization, you
Will
will
do.
probably find a lot of information and a network of other people similar to yourself. It's quite nice when you're doing something that's different and edgy and you don't really know that many people to all of a sudden realize, oh, wow, there's a whole bunch of people with a similar value set and skill development set, and you can then shoot ideas between each other, and maybe there'll be some things that you didn't know that they're doing that you might learn from. They actually have a few podcasts. The one is called Bottom Up Revolution and another one called Up Zoned.
Here
Yeah.
we've been
And
following a few different groups. For
Yeah.
example, the YIMBY group, Yes in My Backyard. There's groups of those in Brisbane and other places. And also Undercover Architect,
Undercover.
which is a sort of an online community that encourages sustainable design. And the phrase that's used here is gentle density, which means gently adding to the density rather than, I guess, harsh density is where you've just got concrete and 3-story buildings everywhere.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, did you get a chance to look at the Instagram link that I sent you? This is Mark. He's created an Instagram page.
This is Instagram gentle density, and it's just got posts showing like the design of the units, what the backyard looks like at the moment, the birds, the plans, the landscaping plans, things like that. So just a progress on showing how things are happening. And that's one way of trying to connect with other people who are doing similar things.
it's great to follow your story as well, that as you progress, people can follow how you're doing it. And I see that at the moment it's just called gentle density. Did you have in mind to create a name for your neighborhood?
Oh, I have a
Yes.
name. Yeah. One Year Court. I like the name One Year because in our local Indigenous, the Gubbi Gubbi people, One Year is like shalom in the sense that it means it's a holistic welcome of love and peace. It's got that goodwill and it's got a wholeness about it. So One Year, when Native people would welcome people, they'd say One Year. And that means everything. Like it's just love and peace and all that sort of good feeling. And we'd put that on the letterbox, have One Year Court.
I love all your thinking that has gone into that name and its appropriateness to what you are creating. So in terms of people plugging into what you're doing, so you've got the Instagram and I'll share the link to that. Are there any other ways people can find you?
We have submitted the plans. The whole concept has been approved by our council. That's all public. And we've just last week submitted the operational works plan. So we're gradually making progress along the process. But
Yeah. I think Instagram is a good start, kind of like
that's
our business card, really. We're not professional developers. We're mum and dad investors, I always say, because when you go online and you look at this development, this urban heat island across the road, you'll go into the council files and you'll see, oh, that's a business, but we're just our own names. It's our name on this development. So we're not out there marketing our development. We're not looking for pre-sales. No, we are creating a community of people for affordable housing that's elegant and sustainable and energy efficient and beautiful.
So in terms of attracting the right kind of people, what are the methods that you're going to use?
The word of mouth works very well. Word is getting out. I've got contacts with real estate. I've got contacts with a whole lot of different networks, our church families, our schools, all these people. And we've already got people lined up who would move in tomorrow if they were built. I don't even think we would need to advertise. There is enough need in this little town that we could fill 3 2-bedroom units. And this house here would do a family. So this is a 4-bedroom house. This is quite a different concept to the units, but we could fill them like this straight away. It will be just deciding what is that demographic going to be like. So that's something that we still have to spend more time about. And do we have a mix of people? Would that work better? If you have the mum, the single mum, and then you have an older woman, so that there's
Yeah.
multi-generational kind of thing happening.
That's fantastic that you're thinking,
But
yeah,
we're
what
open.
makes for a good mix of neighbors. Okay, well, and in terms of yourselves, are you inspired by any casts? Can you mention
Yeah.
those again?
Oh, well, the one that Linda's joined up with
The
is,
undercover architect.
yeah, which
Okay.
is not just a podcast, but it's an
Mm.
online community that trains people how to develop sustainable housing. So we've been very interested in the sustainability question. In fact, that's one other thing I'd like to show you is in Australia, there's a system called NatHERS, which is National House Energy Rating Scheme. And so I've learned about that and modeling in NatHERS software called Hero. You put the design of all of the different rooms and what kinds of materials are in the walls and how much insulation there is and things like that. And then you can run a simulation and come back with a number of stars. And a typical house in Australia is only 2 or 3 stars, which means it's very cold in winter and hot in summer. But now there's a new requirement to be 7 stars. And because these are designed to face the sun, if we add a reasonable amount of insulation, we can probably get up to 8 stars. The average is 8.6 at the moment.
Wow.
And then you can look at the results and see, for example, for the whole project, how efficient each dwelling is. And for the middle unit there, how much energy each room is going to take to heat and cool. And even on the hottest day of the year, hottest week of the year, what will the temperatures be inside each room? It's been a lot of fun to
That's his passion.
That's really neat. I've never seen anything like that. You've gone into that amount of detail to see the energy efficiency. That is great. Into so much detail around how they're going to operate. I'd like to just have a few fun things to end our talk is what's the most interesting home you've ever been in?
Well, we went to open houses on passive housing a few weeks ago, and there was one just up in the Sunshine Coast here, which was kind of totally enclosed. It was a passive house, and so very strong insulation and air conditioning inside, and you close the windows, you can't hear anything outside. And it was wonderful from the energy efficiency and everything, but it kind of felt like being in a box and you were cut off from the outside environment. And so it was wonderful in some ways and I don't know, sad in others because you weren't enjoying the sounds of birds and the breeze blowing through.
For me, it was all about people. And the house that jumped out for me was the Lejar's place in France. We lived in France for a couple of years because Mark had some sabbatical work there and through university. And this is a house that was built as a family home, 1-2-story with an attic, had solar panels back then, didn't it? They had this large, the whole heart of that home was the kitchen. And in France, they love their food. And the French come together and eat as a meal together, and all their kids, and we were there on 2 different sabbatical periods. We saw the children growing up and the mum and the dad cooking the garden produce. They had an enormous vegetable because they were just on the outskirts of a large town, which probably was about a couple of acres. They had chooks, they had sheep at one stage. They grew all their vegetables and ate very little meat. And almost every time we went and stayed with them, we would watch the food evolve in the kitchen, and you'd be all sitting around chatting with your wine, and it was just family connection, home produce, good health and connection, all those values. And to me, that was probably my definition of most interesting house.
That it was able to facilitate all of those things. Yeah, I also usually take a more cultural approach when I think about interesting home. I lived in 12 countries, and so I've seen some pretty interesting architecture, but usually it's around, like in South Africa, there's a roundhouse that's built actually for the ancestors and more ceremonial. It can be used for family gatherings, but it's also where more ceremonial things happen. But it's always a feature in that rural community where I was living. They all have a round house, that spiritual center, and then other things are built around it. And I thought, wow, that's really fantastic to honor that sense of community and spirit before the individualness of living on the site. And anything else you'd recommend for folks where people can be inspired around these ideas?
The other thing that we've joined is the Renew organization here, which has 2 magazines. One's called Renew and the other one's called Sanctuary. And Sanctuary is about house design for sustainability. And I've found that very interesting to read and get ideas from. It's a quarterly magazine.
Is
so
that an
that's
Australian magazine, or where is it?
mostly Australian.
I've just been pointing people to Undercover Architect simply because of the resourcing. As Mark says, it's around sustainability and design, but in terms of actually the logistics of how you actually go through and do a multi-development, and how you do the whole who's on your A team. That's training for me.
And just how to design a house.
Yeah, that's so important because, as you say, you're not professional. You haven't been trained, and you're not going to maybe carry on doing this. So you have a lot to learn for a smallish project, and you're trying to keep it affordable. So you can't be going to professionals every time you have a question. That would add up in hourly costs. So it's really inspiring to hear that you're doing a lot of self-education and connecting into networks where you can almost get pro bono advice, so that you're able to do the project really well. And you're seeming to be quite excited about the learning that you're doing, that it's of interest to you. So I would hope that others would be inspired, looking at a humongous backyard that is not serving much of a purpose considering our housing crisis, that they'd be inspired, that they can come to your Instagram page and see what you've already done, connect with you personally, just to even get jump started into it. If you're a housing nerd like I am, I'd love to hear what topics interest you. Please write to zola@commonground.net.nz to tell me about your interest. And if you have a guest, please recommend them. Otherwise, I'll go on the hunt for a guest that's got that topic. And if you are listening to this in February, March, or April of 2025, know that there is a conference, or a hui, in Aotearoa, New Zealand, specifically on these topics of what is better housing for people and planet. It's called the Coho Hui. It's going to be held on the 15th through the 17th of April in Otatahi Christchurch. We're going to have academic speakers and some tours on the second day to be able to see some of the examples in real life of these kinds of neighborhoods. So go to cohohui.com to check out more about the hui and register to attend.